Education for the 25-26 school year. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1, newly elected board member. Congratulations, Jeff, for 5 years on the Board of Education. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. Congratulations. If you would please read the oath of office.
I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office of board member of the Board of Education of Spakio Union School District for the term of July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2030, according to the best of my ability.
Jeff. Agenda item 4.01, election of the board president. Do I have any nominations for the office of president of the Board of Education for the 25-26 school year?
Nominate Dan Fuller.
Do I have a second? Are there any more nominations? Nominations are now closed. We have a nomination made by Jeff, seconded by Sasha, to nominate Dan Fuller for office of the president of the Board of Education for the Spakio Union School District for the 25-26 school year. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Congratulations, Dan.
Thank you.
We'll now turn the meeting over to Mr. Fuller.
You're done.
I'm done.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item 4.02, which is our election of the vice president. Do I have any nominations for the office of vice president of the Board of Education for the 2025-2026 school year?
Nominate Jeff.
Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Are there any other nominations for the office of vice president of the Board of Education? I declare nominations are now closed. We have a nomination made by Sasha, seconded by Joanne, to nominate Jeff to the office of vice president of the Board of Education of Spakio Union Free School District for the 2025-2026 school year. All in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Item 5 is the reorganizational meeting consent agenda portion of the meeting. 5.01 is consent agenda resolution to resolve that the Board of Education of the Spakio Union Free School District hereby approves the following reorganizational meeting consent agenda items as stated. 5.02 through 5.13. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye, that's 5-0 as well. Okay, that brings us to the regular business meeting portion. Item 7.01 is comments from the public on consent agenda items only. Do we have any comments from the public on consent agenda items? Okay, 8.01 is the consent agenda resolution. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as written?
Can I actually just
Sure.
have further discussion on 8.17, school lunch budget?
My apologies, I should have asked that. Why don't we do that? We'll pull a motion to pull 8.17 from the consent agenda.
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor? Okay, that passes 5-0. So we'll finish up the regular consent agenda resolution unless there's other questions or comments that need to be discussed on any of the items. Okay, I'll ask for a motion to accept the consent agenda less item 8.17. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Okay, 8.17, let's talk about it.
So the state's gonna start covering, the meals, from my understanding. I just wanted to see while we're discussing the budget or approving the budget, if there's any additional, resource or any additional, help that we can provide to the menu, at this point for approving it, to try to get us up to, a more desirable cafeteria menu. Than was, I know we had worked through this a couple of years ago, and
That's an ongoing mission for the food services director. She tries to come up with things that fall within all the parameters of the salt limitations, the sugar limitations, the carb limitations. She must serve fresh fruit and vegetable and that kind of stuff. So she's definitely using the resources that she has to try to come up with more variety for each meal and still fall within those parameters. So yes, that's
can we provide her with more support in that area to try to
support
in funding or budgeting towards it, or trying
the
to?
general fund budget that the voters approve includes an allocation that's directed for school lunch. So there's an allocation of I think $60,000 that would be available for school.
Is that the amount referred to in the letter? 67.8. Is that the same amount?
67.
The letter in that, or the memo rather, in that 8.17 mentions
Yeah.
67.8.
Right,
Or
that's
pro-
the
or
increase.
that's or approximately 9%. That's the
Right,
increase.
that's the increase year to year.
Okay.
And the general fund budget has an allocation that is earmarked for school lunch.
And we did, was it a year or two ago, we upped it a bigger portion, I think it was when we were talking about this.
We did up it. School lunch was, and we're lucky in our school lunch program is really self-sufficient, so we don't have to subsidize it all the time. But we do subsidize it just for things like this, so that she has more flexibility in her choices, in her choices.
Does that answer his question? So just for clarity, would more money make a better menu? Or is what you're saying?
I would just like to, not necessarily more desirable menu, because obviously kids just want pizza, but
More variety. maybe.
more variety or just a healthier option, or just.
Farm to table blocks.
Yeah, I see what some of our surrounding menus offer, and speaking with my kids about it, at least, they bring their lunch every day, and it's not, something that's on the menu that's desirable, is still the word that I'm coming up with, it's not the right word, but just like to try to help in whatever way we can to make sure we're getting a nice, healthy option for kids at school, especially some of them that only get good meal at school.
Absolutely.
So how do we answer that question? I think what he's saying is suggesting or think about having more money go to school lunch. Would that make the menu different?
No.
No, I was just gonna say, I think Lisa and I will start to work on that, looking at her budget, looking at what the allocation is for the district, and come up with the best way that she can make the menu more desirable within the limitations that she, nutrition limitations that she has to work with. I mean, we do have options, she's incorporated, really great options for us to being more sensitive to the allergy related things.
I guess it's what I would find useful is if we are going to consider any more money, that we we hear a little bit more about what some of those recent decisions or changes have been. I mean, we've got to, I think, recognize the expertise of the people who know the regulations, you and much better, the people who know the regulations and know the dietary science that we're calling all of us move to. So if there have been changes that that have been made recently, that'd be helpful to know. But I'd certainly want to know more what's happened rather than just put money at it. We don't have any expertise, I don't think.
No, I can get that information of just kind of a high level of what the dietary nutritional requirements are for each meal and the things that we're doing to.
Because I know there's been change over the last, well, many years actually, in terms of the standards.
The other thing I would offer, we've talked about it some before, is I would argue, I think, that it's not even just about putting more money towards food and menu items. I've always thought it was a staffing issue. There's a reason how and why we prepare what we prepare. If I said to you, you've got to keep a full salad bar of freshly cut vegetables throughout the day, but there's only one of you's on the cashier and the other is so I see that personally as more of a limiting factor than just the money piece. To make the kind of food that you're talking about, it takes resources. That's chicken nuggets into a toaster oven is a lot faster than making a fresh salad for the table at home.
That's a good point.
I don't think necessarily throwing money at it, but support is needed that we can try to offer to get those options out there.
There are definitely, fresh salad options that are available every day, fresh food options, and she definitely tries to gear the menu options to the age group so that the secondaries get a little bit different menu options than the kindergarten.
Like Dan said, if we go on a visit, we should be able to eat the food. The children should eat the food. I want food, so adults. Other children too.
Last time we went, she gave us the magic soup. Recently, she was trying to give it to us. So I wonder if we could maybe have a little bit of just a report on school lunch maybe at the next board meeting. I do know it's more complicated, that. I worked in a bunch of districts and I've heard the same thing about cafeteria, I do think Lisa does a really great job with everything, but there's always more, it's not a restaurant, but we're always looking for ways to improve and to, there's desirability, trying to change with the times and kind of stick with the rules of the nutrition and all that stuff. So maybe just get a better understanding of what she does, what is actually served, and hear from the adults, not just maybe from the kids who come home and like the such and such.
Yeah, that'd be very helpful.
No, that's fine. I get with Lisa and definitely at a very soon upcoming board meeting. We'll have that information and some of her plans for the upcoming school year.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I appreciate the complexity. For what it's worth, I teach the CIA, and there are constant complaints about food. Students make it, they serve it, they complain about it. I never,
They're complaining.
no college I know of in general is people
That's
happy with the food 100%,
mass-produced
even at the
food.
CIA. They're always
Yeah.
complaining.
I will say, at my college, I didn't necessarily like it, and I went back for a reunion, and I was like, wow,
It's better.
this is so much better.
Yeah, right. A little distance helps.
Just have one more question about that one. The I don't know, they had the pizza bids or whatever it was for it, and do we use Tony's or do we use
Tony's.
Domino's or
Tony's.
I think Domino's was one of that.
I think we just may have done that in like an emergency case, but typically we use Tony.
And Tony's like it would just seem like more of a fresh option than
It's more of a fresh option, it's more of a reasonable option, and he's been known to deliver what we need when we need it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Today's a big one.
Yes.
Okay. that said, do I have a motion to accept item 8.17?
So,
Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye, that passes 5-0. Item 9.01, do I have a motion to take from the table agenda item 4.03 from the June 17, 2025 board meeting? Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye, passes 5-0 as well. Item 9.02, adopt the proposed policy 2245, the ex officio student member of the board. Did everybody have a chance to look at that, and were there items that were discussed, addressed appropriately? Okay, with that said then, we'll ask for a motion to accept 9.02. Sure, sure.
There's a choice, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a choice.
So I did attach two choices, one with all, everything in one policy, and then the second one was to separate the criteria into an appendix. So,
one was recommended by the attorney.
yeah, so in other words, when we say recommended by the attorney, usually they guide us with saying, we recommend that you put, whatever's needed in the policy, so whatever is required. So sometimes they say it's not necessary to put everything in here, but when I spoke to Allison, yes, they do advise that, but in this, in other cases as well, she said, whatever the board, feels. Like, in other words, what they're used to is policy, whatever is required, because if you're gonna, have like practices or any type of, process, usually you don't want to put that in a policy because sometimes that changes, and then if you do change, then you would have to come out to the board and revise the policy. Right, so, I mean, in talking to her further, she said, we do advise that, she goes, but really, it's up to, the board, whatever they, prefer. So I hope that answers your question on that. So, whatever you prefer, you can incorporate everything in that one policy that I gave you, or separate it. That's clear.
I think it being pretty new is probably going to be a little fluid, possibly so having the ability to, my opinion at least, to be however, I also being able to make changes if you need to without really rewriting the policy.
In general, what you just said is almost like for everything, any policy or anything, because especially with something that's new, when we look at, we won't have the same issue really with the electric devices, but I would imagine that's going to change, as we learn and grow. So it's similar, what you just said, I think, I'm surprised, as a blanket statement.
I'm fine with one that doesn't have it all included.
Without the attachment, is that what is that the way we would word that?
The one with the attachment.
With the tax, is that what you're saying?
Because it's an
With the
attachment.
exhibits.
Oh,
It's not
yeah.
that's what you was-
Okay,
yeah.
Just to
not
clarify.
a separate policy.
Right. So it would be 2245 and 2245E,
Yeah,
separate.
that's separate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, especially if to incorporate it would make it anomalous, would make it stand out amongst all the other policies that would be kind of problematic too. So,
May I just add one more thing, just so it's fresh in my mind, is the next step after we go through this is obviously the board member has to participate in the interview process, which probably going to happen very soon. Ken reached out. I mean, it could be, it could be very simple. I mean, interview, just schedule it.
We have two candidates, so we want to just interview them. In a perfect world, choose for the next board meeting.
I nominate Sasha.
I nominate myself.
Awesome.
Is everyone agreed? Sasha will sit down.
Yes.
Sasha, you around the next couple weeks?
Yeah. I'll reach out. Thank you.
So just to be clear, it's policy 2245 with the attachment. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Is that appropriate enough for? Okay. So do I have a motion to adopt proposed policy 2245, the ex officio student member of the board, with the, as the option with the attachment? You have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. That passes 5-0 as well. 9.03 is the first reading of proposed policy 5695, students and personal electronic devices. Any board discussion on 9.03?
I think it's sufficient. I mean, it has all that we need in terms of policy, in terms of electrical devices. I mean, it covers everything. Communication, storage,
I have a question. How do they plan on enforcing that? Because as it is, my understanding was the middle school are supposed to be in their lockers and turned off anyway. And that doesn't happen.
It's
So
have to
how are you going to
enforce
enforce
it.
it? If that's the rule now.
They have to enforce it, it's more than a
Yes,
rule.
nothing.
And I guess my question is, how are they planning on doing that? Like, are they going to check bags when kids walk in? Like, how do they plan on
I don't know
enforcing
if
it?
checking bags when you walk in, but I think in the, Sandra, was it in the policy, or they had kind of an action plan about?
There's disciplinary in the policy.
Yeah.
Yes, it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if they see it, then the disciplinary action is enforced at that point.
Right. I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of kids, at least in the middle school that I know of, that use their phones during the day and are not seen.
Next year's gonna be different, because it's not allowed, you know, in the study and the work we did this year on the next generation, like they have the backup to kind of say why. But you're right, you know, it has to be enforced, so we'll just have to make sure we enforce it. Because they said that the principals, including the middle school principal, they were very heavily involved in coming up with the progressive discipline and how to do it, and they were, and John and Val could jump in, they were in that meeting, like, they were on board with it, it was really good discussions. They spoke with the teachers in the buildings, they spoke with community members, PTA members about this. Some students were spoken to too, especially at the high school, about how to do it, so it seems like it's all, but like I said before, if it's not working, we're going to have to do something different.
Right.
Because it was just different last year or the year before, especially where, you know, even in high school is my best way, is like, it still was around. You know, like it was in study halls, it was in cafeterias. That made it around even more. Now that can't happen. So, well, we're gonna have violators.
Yes.
You know?
So, I mean, it's impossible for, you know, each school to get every child to do what they're supposed to do. But the solution to that is all hands on deck. You know, teachers, the administrators work together. If they see something, say something, and, you know, actually, you know, we take it. We don't do what you need to do. So,
And that's the plan, to take them
Yeah, it says
eventually,
that.
they be housed in the office.
yeah.
They just have to do that, follow through. And I think what's written is good,
Yeah.
just have to follow through on it.
I think last year, or the last couple of years, more of a reactive, if they saw it or there's an issue that it would be addressed, where hopefully now it's going to be a proactive approach that, as I said, all hands on deck, there's teachers in the hallway, there's administrators in the hallway that can actively make sure that it's being addressed. I hope.
And in the bag, it was allowed to be in the bag. You know, so, I don't know, that's a bag here today, on Sasha Field's bag, like the phone's in the bag, it's right there.
Yeah,
So.
I think she was talking more at the middle school level.
No, same thing, but it won't be in their bag.
I don't, were they allowed to
It
have that in
wasn't
the bag?
supposed to be in their bag this
Yeah,
year.
it's supposed to be in their lockers.
Yeah.
And I did hear that there were some teachers that when kids took them out, like towards the end of class, it was just like, whatever.
So
So,
that came
Process-wise, this has to be approved by the state as well? Is that correct? Or do I recall that correctly? I thought that we had to, I thought the state ed had to maybe review and approve the language in that policy. I could be wrong about that.
Well, it just need to be posted.
I think we had
Yeah, I
that
think
policy.
that's
Have to be posted on our website by all.
Okay, great.
And I'm assuming that this will be publicized to the students, but during beginning of school
Yes, communication
orientation.
supposed to go home
So
about communication, so if you think about it, if previously a parent texts their child during third period, am I picking you up today?
Phone goes
That
off.
can't happen, so it goes back to when we might have been in school,
Yeah.
right? And a lot of different, the policy outlines, what you know, you call the main office, would be the simplest example, to get that message, and it was like going back to what we used to do.
The secretary's been apprised of the numerous phone calls he'll be getting
Yeah.
now throughout the day. So it's going to be a big change.
Yeah.
You have something?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is what you're referring to in the policy, where it says, beginning September 2026, annual thereafter, additional full coverage and annual report on the website. Is that probably referred to?
No, I just thought that the state had outlined certain things and then said the school has to come up with penalties, for infractions and other things, and I thought that had to go back, but as long as, I just wanted to make sure I understood the process. That's all.
So you would want that
Number coming back, of all the districts, but they definitely set the parameters that we have to follow.
If this is first reading, second reading is at the next meeting, and the one after that is when it's being adopted.
Right, so hopefully,
Second reading approves it.
Second reading.
Second reading approves it.
so
Yeah.
this is the first reading, and then everything is fine.
And when's the second one? Or when's the next
It'll
meeting?
be at the end of July.
July 30th. July 30th, I believe. And I agree that it shouldn't be in the policy, but we've kind of had this conversation, to Joanne's point, you have to also set the example. So will there be some communications to the teachers and staff about not using their phones in front of the kids as much as possible?
Which we'll talk through, I don't know how they're communicating that, but, it's definitely, that's gonna be an interesting dynamic, right? Because an adult might use their phone for something different, but it's still not setting an example, so it has to, they definitely have to walk the walk and talk the talk, and find the balance. Which they do, even for emergency situations, like the teacher's cell phone will be utilized for getting information to them. So it's just kind of, it's proper balance as opposed to taking the phone all the time versus using it on.
Just a quick question came to mind when you mentioned that. Is in our safety protocols, is say there's an intruder in the building, are there notifications that go out to teachers in cases like that? Text messages to teachers' cell phones, for instance, or anything like that? That's not part of the protocol.
Not part of our plan, but I do know that sometimes there is.
I mean, I imagine that might happen informally in an emergency. And certainly you want to be able to do that.
Just an intruder.
Yeah.
That's the deal.
Well, right, but other things too. I mean, other kinds of
What
emergencies.
they do get is school messenger alerts, which we would utilize. It's still school messenger, we would use Parent Square. So oftentimes that, just as you as a parent, you're gonna get them on your phone. So it's just, that's not an everyday occurrence, so we just have to have that balance. I would imagine their phone would be on the person.
Mhm.
But should not be. I don't think they are.
Yeah, well, it's the difference between a student and a teacher. I mean, it's policies for students.
You know what a student will say.
Well, that could be part of the
You know
response.
what your child would say.
You know, that's part of the response. We live within those laws all the time.
Well, it also just goes to the student's anxiety at that point too, though. They'll see it and, oh, I want mine, I want mine.
Yeah.
So, in as much as possible. That's all I would ask. Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the first reading of proposed policy 5695, students and personal electronic devices? Do I have a second? All in favor? Passes 5-0. 9.04 is our first reading of proposed policy 8113.1, extreme heat condition days. Board discussion? I guess I would just ask the numbers, the 82 degrees, the 88 degrees, those were set by the state. Okay. Do we feel like 88 is the right number? Or can we, I'm just asking. I don't know. 88 is pretty hot in the classroom, if you ask me.
I don't know if we have that discretion. We may can make it lower if we wanted to, but we can't go higher.
I wouldn't ask to go higher, that's for sure. I'm just thinking because, the 82, you're supposed to take these measures
Right,
to help potentially reduce the temperature in that room.
right.
And then if it still increases up to 88, that's when there has to be other.
Then, right, that's when the building principals are gonna come up with
Yeah.
their plan of where they can relocate students to cooler parts of the building.
Are there enough large spaces in each of the buildings to do that? If you have multiple
Combined
classrooms,
classes.
They will combine classes.
Yeah.
So that's something that principals are actually working on this summer, is to come up with what that actual plan will look like.
okay.
It's also one of the things that we're looking at for the needs assessment, which I think we will need to add, air conditioning spaces, not
Here's-
just, and I don't think just like a window unit, like a rooftop unit to give us more flexibility. But this, even before this, if it's too hot, it's too hot, and we've always done stuff, as principal over the years, bringing water, you're buying fans, and it's all not perfect, all doesn't solve everything, but it does give you a mitigating factor to do something. But we've been doing that. And John, as a principal, has been doing that for years without any sort of formalized thing. I think some places they didn't, so they needed to formalize something.
Do we have a problem child more than another? Is Hagen probably the hottest building of the four?
I don't know, I think they all have their hot spots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They all-
Yeah.
And it's just a
And
lot
And it's
of
weird.
where the
It's
sun
like,
is.
it depends upon.
So sometimes the
Yeah.
sun's
And
in the
trees.
afternoon, part of the building, that's really the high
Trees,
part.
right, don't have those trees that they.
That side of the front.
Yes.
High school will tell you about the way their windows are facing
Library has a lot of
different
windows.
versus being right on the end. There's always something. We did at Nassau, we did a couple years ago, we were very close to having each general ed classroom air conditioned, so we decided to do that for our youngest students. It's not the most efficient way to do it, but there are air conditioned spaces that we have to have due to 504s, and we sort of, in a perfect world, if we can, we leave the air conditioner after the child or a teacher or person needed it moves someplace else.
Right.
And that has helped us, because we put them, it costs money to put them in, because we can't just, it's not like at your home where you just put them in the window. There's a lot of security risk here, you can just push it in, so it has to be.
The windows have to be specifically cut, so we have to have protection instead.
Are the cafeterias in any of the buildings air conditioned? No, right. Those are, just thinking of the
That would
space.
be the place
The
where
biggest
we would
spaces.
look.
Auditorium.
The auditorium at the high school
Auditorium.
is, so that would be a perfect example of if it's a 88 plus or whatever. I would imagine there would be classes in that space.
Okay. Anybody else want on this discussion? Okay, do I have a motion to accept the first reading of proposed policy 8113.1, extreme heat condition days? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Passes 5-0. Item 10.01, board correspondence. I don't believe we have any. Is anybody aware of that? 10.02, comments from the public on non-agenda items. Okay, 10.03, comments from the board. None? Summertime. I'll move that over to 10.04, and comments from the superintendent.
Just two quick ones. One is, we've talked about the Anxious Generation. I'll just send this around. This was the latest edition of Vanguard, and we interviewed Mr. Lynch and myself about what we were doing here. Pretty captivating. There's some other stuff in the article from what other schools are doing, which are interesting too. So I thought I'd share that with the board to take a look at. We really talked about, I think our piece comes up more in the middle of the article. The article starts talking about a different school, and then we kind of take over a couple of pages in. Just something to take with you. You don't have to look at it now. But something, again, we're proud of, and I think it also might explain even in further detail some of the stuff that happened. It is summertime, but I do want to recognize someone who's going to be leaving us, who's here today, and that's Josue, who's back there. This is his last meeting. His last day is Friday. He has an unbelievable opportunity in Texas. He really has, I don't want to talk too much about Josue, but he's recently a graduate from Marist, and I think he's going to be using his new degree. He's got an excellent opportunity, but across the U.S.
Wow.
So we wish you best, and he's driving there, so we definitely give you safe travels, and we appreciate everything you've done for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Congrats.
The final piece, I guess, Sandra sent around times for the July 30th at 5. Quick question we had, we probably will keep that, but would the day before, the 29th at 5, also work for everybody?
Yeah, July 30th, they decided implementation in school, so I would,
So July 30th actually wasn't good.
yeah.
Well, that's good to know. Does the 29th work for everybody at 5, right? Does this 5 work? Because I know Jeff, does 5 work for the time?
That is fine.
It's fine. So the 29th works?
Yeah, that works for me.
So then since we might as well we'll make that switch then, because that will enable the whole board to be here? That makes sense? That would make sense. Wow. That was the easiest scheduling, that is awesome.
All right, thank you. 11.01. Board will vote to adjourn to executive session to discuss contract negotiations and the superintendent's evaluation. No further business is anticipated after the executive session. Do I have a motion to enter into executive session? Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye, it's 5-0. Thank you, and we'll see you on July 29th, 5 p.m.
At 5 p.m.